I'm next on the program, so I'll introduce myself once again. I'm Andy from Wyenandt from Rutgers University, and I do a lot of the fungicide work with the disease and pathogen down at RARIC, our research station in Bridgeton, New Jersey. I am about an hour west of here and about an hour south of Philadelphia. So I'm down and located in the southern part of the state. I'm the guy with the microphone, so we're going to try to capture as many comments as we can. So I'm going to be walking around the room and probably holding a microphone near you, so when we're recording we can capture it all. All right, I'll be okay with the sound back there? Okay, I'm getting hand signals, but I'm going to start by talking about some of the work that we're doing in New Jersey on trying to control the disease with fungicides. Then Meg will speak, and then Rick Wade from Florida will speak. So you're going to hear a lot about fungicide efficacy over the next few minutes. We've evaluated fungicides, both conventional as well as organic, for about 6 or 7 years now down at the research station in Bridgeton, New Jersey. We do small plot work on a regular basis, and we've evaluated a number of different fungicides as foliar sprays, as drips, as well as combinations of the two. So these trials are conducted in the southern part of the state. We use simply randomized complete block designs. We use small plots. Our beds are spaced on 5-foot centers. Our plots are typically 10 feet long, about 3 feet wide, 2 rows of plants, which are typically transplanted and spaced 9 inches apart in the row. Now, of course, we use 4 replications. We have our buffer treatments as well as guard rows, as in any standard fungicide trial that you're hearing us talk about this morning. This work was actually started as part of Kathleen Homer's master's thesis in 2002, so I'll first describe 2 years of studies that her and Bill Barney did down at the research station in 2010, 2011. As you can see, we've looked at a number of compounds. Most of these at the time did not have any sort of label for downy mildew control. As Jim said earlier, over the past 3 or 4 years, the number of fungicides available to you has expanded a little bit, and hopefully that will continue more so in the future. But these are the fungicides that Catherine looked at. Typical, we had our untreated control. We looked at Revis, which is manipropamid, Oxidate, which is a disinfestant, hydrogen dioxide. We looked at different coppers as well as phosphoric acid products, some biological controls, some oils, some more traditional conventional fungicides, as well as Provocure Flex, Ranman, which has Amlistar, and then Reason. So what we do is we'll go out, we'll spray fungicides once a week, about every 7 days, as described by most labels. Then we'll go out and we'll rate plantings, or we'll count the number of leaves that have sporulation on them, and we'll track that disease progress through the growing season so we can develop what we call disease progress curves to look at the control or efficacy of the fungicide. And this is some of that work here. Then at the end of the season, we'll take area under disease progress curve values to help us compare those treatments to see which ones work best. And the lower the number is, the better the treatment is. And I'll explain it as we go along. So again, we'll go out, we'll measure once a week. This in 2010, we started on August 7th. We went through the 10th of October, or the 2nd of October. And you can see in our untreated control, by the end of the season, where we didn't spray any fungicides, we had about 94% of those leaves that we evaluated had downy mildew on them. So we know we have a lot of disease pressure. And that's good for our trials. People like myself, Meg, Rick, we want as much disease as possible so we can really tease these differences in treatments out. As you can see here, and this is going to be a theme you probably hear throughout the rest of the mornings, a lot of the organic-based compounds that we looked at really haven't provided any level of control since we started looking at them 4 or 5 years ago. All right. At best, you may see some suppression with these. Here's Oxidate. There's some level of control there, but not a whole lot. Copper, really no levels of control. Combinations of copper and some of the organics again. But really, in the first year of the study, and this is our first large-scale look at fungicides for Basil Downy mildew control, the phosphorus product K-Fight really looked the best throughout the growing season. And that's as a weekly spray over the top of the plants. As I said earlier, the lower this value is, the better the disease control is for that fungicide program. See some more of our conventional products from 2010. Again, our untreated control, 94%. What was surprising to us in this first year of this trial is that some of these products that have downy mildew labels and phytophthora labels and other crops really did not provide a whole lot of control this first year for us in these foliar programs. Again, with the Wyenandt, Revis, and Presidio, where we would have expected to see some decent control, I would have thought we would have seen better control in these programs. But that first year, the K-Phi product, or the phosphoric acid, really stand out. At the time, Amastar was only one, or Quadris was one of the few fungicides that had a label, and we really didn't see any control with that. So that was a little surprising to us the first time we started to look at fungicides in depth in New Jersey. All right. In 2011, we looked at the same fungicides again because we want to replicate our trials over different years so we know we have good results. Again, in untreated control, 74% of our leaves were infected by the end of the growing season. But again, with our organic compounds, we look at the end of the season, you can see 81% with oxalate were infected, 64 with organocide, and some of these were just really too high, of course, and those wouldn't be acceptable for the marketplace. Our K-Phi control was, again, based on some of our biologicals in 2010, provided the best level of control compared to some of the organics. And we look at, again, those same conventional type fungicides in 2011. Our best level of control we saw was with Randman, where we had 21% of the leaves infected. Again, better, but not acceptable for the marketplace. Okay. So based on this first 2 years of our trials at the research station, the K-Phi, or the phosphoric acid products, provided the best level of control. All right. Possible reasons for these, remember that the phosphide fungicides are truly systemic, so they'll move both up and down in the plant compared to some of the coppers, which is a protectant, and some of the other conventionals, which may have translaminar activity but may not be systemic. All right. And surprisingly, and we'll talk about this more, is we saw moderate levels of control with some of our more conventional products. Rick's going to speak here in a few minutes, as well as Meg, and they're going to probably show you some different results with these same products used in other areas of the country. So at this point in time, what we've been recommending for growers in New Jersey, and depending on the region, it's best to grow basils in the spring. For control, you need to have some sort of fungicide down before the disease shows up, and that's going to be a recurring theme throughout this morning. You want to make sure you try to use fungicides that provide good control, but you also got to remember fungicide resistance problems, because some of our newer chemistries are going to come out or they're already on the market. There's going to be a high risk for resistance to develop to those fungicides. Okay. Of course, again, fungicides are going to provide low levels of control, just aren't going to allow you to have anything acceptable for the market. So we continued this work in 2012, 2013, and 2014. Again, looking at different programs, both conventional as well as some of the organic products. We went ahead and dropped some of the stuff we knew wasn't going to work all that well. But again, this is in 2012. You can see in our untreated control where we went a lot of disease. We had disease really early in the season and it stayed throughout. We had about 80% of the foliage infected. All right. This is where it starts to get exciting, where we start to see some levels of control where we're reducing the number of leaves down to numbers like these. Okay, down to 8%, 7%, and so forth. Again, Xampro, which is a chemical, provided decent control. Resin, which is a frac-coated 11 fungicide. Profite, which is a phosphoric acid, just like K-Phi, provided a good level of control. And that's what we would expect because they're in the same frac code. They have the same mode of action. All right. So if a phosphite product works well, you might expect that the other phosphite products would just work as equally well. And this would be the same for any of the other conventional fungicides as well. Quadris plus K-Phi, very good control. And some of the newer chemicals, Raman, tank mix with K-Phi alternated with Presidio plus K-Phi. Again, we got decent levels of control in 2012. All right. And downy mildew was actually present in the field before our first fungicide application. So you can see here, early on in the season, surprisingly, it took us a lot to catch back up. So this is really why it's so important that if downy mildew is in your area, is you get your fungicides on before you see downy mildew in your field, because it took us a long time to catch up. Again, our first rating, none of these looked very good, but over time, we did catch back up and get somewhat control with the disease, but we would like to see this level of control up here instead of later in the season. 2013, we've looked at a number of experimental compounds as well. I'm sure Meg and Rick might talk about those as well. And we did 3 ratings in 2013. Again, downy mildew was present in our field about a month before this rating, and we had around 5 fungicide applications done prior to this rating date here. So downy mildew was present before we started spraying. Again, early on, not a whole lot of control because the pathogen was present before our first application, with the exception of Ridamil. Ridamil, as we know, is mefenoxin. It would be subdue in the greenhouse area. Very good against phytophthora and other downy mildews. Again, that application early on, very good levels of control. But what you see here is, as we went on during the season, we saw less of control with mefenoxin. All right? And this might be issues with some mefenoxin insensitivity in basal downy mildew, and that's something we're going to need to monitor very closely, no matter where you are, okay? Because resistance is going to be a major problem. Again, K-Phyte, decent control. We had a lot to begin with, but again, we got some control later on as we put more foliar applications down. What we find in New Jersey is that the Phosphides work better as foliar applications than they do as drip applications. And I got a little bit of data that I'll share with you in a few minutes about that. Okay. This is the rating scale that we would use to rate downy mildew incidence on some of our programs. It's just a categorical scale where we just flip the leaves over, and if 1 to 10% of the leaf is infected, it gets a 1. 11 to 25%, it gets a 2, and having infected or anything greater than 50% infection would get a 4. So this is just our basic rating scale to give you an idea how we rate downy mildew and so forth. This is from our trial this past year in 2014, looking at, again, some chitin-based products, K-Phyte as a drench and as a foliar treatment, a Ridamil Gold at transplanting, followed by some experimentals which aren't on the market yet. Hopefully some of these compounds you'll see in some of our slides today will be on the market in the near future. And again, early on, very good control when we had Ridamil down at transplanting. Okay, during our first rating, we had about 68% of the leaves infected in our untreated plots. When we applied Ridamil or this new compound through the drip, we had very good control early on. In our second rating, you can see downy mildew, we saw a little bit more, and by the end, there are basically non-significant differences between some of our better programs. Again, this chitin-based product, we really didn't see any efficacy with it. Unfortunately, as I said, with the organic products, and Meg and Rick might have more to say about this, is at best you might get some suppression with them, from what we can tell. All right. So we're still looking for the magic organic product for some of your organic growers or greenhouse growers where you can't use some of our more conventional fungicides. Okay. So we actually wanted to look at some of the differences between the phosphite-based products since they worked so well in the first 2 years of our trial. So we went ahead and compared a couple of different phosphate products as foliar applications. We sprayed them 10 times once a week during the growing season, and we went out and we measured downy mildew control. And again, from a control standpoint, we saw similar levels of control regardless of the phosphite-based material we worked. Our pressure wasn't extraordinarily high during this trial, but we did see some efficacy compared to our untreated control. This isn't statistically analyzed, but you can see we saw similar levels of control when we just applied Ridamil Gold copper foliar in the same regards. All right. When we take these same phosphites and we put them through the drip once a week during the growing season, again, compared to our untreated control, again, pressure here is low, but there's really no difference here. Going to be someone here. The best, you can see there's slight differences between the different phosphites, but again, this isn't going to lead to anything that's significantly important. Again, but when we compare that to Ridamil through the drip during the production season, we can see Ridamil did provide a better level of control when you compare it to some of the phosphites. This is a trial, that same trial in 2014, looking at the different phosphites compared to a standard what we consider Ridamil as well as untreated control. Again, the biggest issue here is that when we apply Ridamil, our levels of control with Ridamil this past year weren't as good as we've seen in the past. All right. Whether this is a resistance issue or timing or whatnot, I'm not exactly sure. But just remember, with some of these conventional products, that have high risks for resistance to develop them, if you overuse them, resistance will develop in downy mildew, and then those chemicals are no longer going to be effective for you. All right. So when you're spraying and new labels come out, just make sure you follow the labels and make sure you make the proper rotations. It's just a good thing for everyone to do. And I like to make our agronomics here, as Jim said, this is a USDA-funded grant where they give us some money to do this work. Are there any questions? I'm going to walk back here. You're picking me up, right? So if I come back here and I should run because I'm holding up the works here. Go ahead, sir.
Let's see, I had a question about the phosphoric acids. Again, we're doing greenhouse production. We'd had a downy mildew outbreak. We were working with a product called Phosphide. We were fogging it. We weren't really having very good results. Then I was talking to some people, and someone had mentioned that these compounds may start breaking down quickly after contact with water. We were using a fogger, so we were setting it up, maybe fogging 4 hours later. And anyway, I was just curious, since I've heard so much good about these chemicals or compounds on downy mildew. Do you know about, is there a breakdown once it's mixed with water? Could that have been why we weren't seeing the results? We switched out of it, changed to some other things, and pulled ourselves out of it. But again, we just weren't getting the control that we were expecting.
With the fogger. I have no experience using foggers, but remember the water is just the carrier, so it's going to carry the product.
Yes, there's limitations on the wireless mic. The podium mic's up there, so you'll have to live by talking louder, please.
Okay, so you're not.
Main question was, does the water cause a breakdown of the phosphoric acid?
It's the break up. Go ahead, Dave.
I'd like to add into that. Chemically, there are differences between phosphate molecules. You can have a single phosphate molecule, which can be attacked by oxygen atoms in the environment, water, soil, whatnot. Then there are long chain molecules of phosphate molecules that take longer to break down because they can only be attacked from the ends, so it takes longer for them to break down. So there can be differences between compounds.
It's not phosphate.
Yeah, it turns to phosphate turns to phosphate once the oxygen attacks it. Once it becomes a phosphate, it's a fertilizer. No longer acts as a fungicide.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let me.
Energy.
Right. It picks up the oxygen and turns to phosphate.
Phosphate from like it's not phosphoric acid. It's phosphite.
Right. Yeah.
Don't just go out and buy a drum of phosphoric acid.
Yeah. That's.
They manufacture phosphates by taking phosphoric acids, reacting it to drive off the oxygen atom to turn the phosphate fertilizer source to a phosphate. And the phosphate is the actual fungicide. So the process reverses then in the environment, going back to phosphate.
Good comments. Go ahead, Steve. Speak up.
Okay. Yeah, just from your slides just now, I noticed that you did the field trials testing the different chemicals or organic products for disease control, and you started like in August, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the disease severity was pretty high, and then you all the way to October, and I saw the disease quite low. So does that mean your treatment, I mean for some treatment, showing good effect, does that mean the sprays protect the new growth of the basil plants from the infection?
Yeah, so what the question was, we early on, from our standpoint, we would like to have fungicides down. From our standpoint, we would like to have some fungicides down before the fungus arrives in our area. But based on the way we do our system, we typically we do everything by transplant. We transplant late in the season, so we know we have good pressure from downy mildew. Okay, and so unfortunately, downy mildew may be in the area way before we get a chance to transplant. So the pressure is already high to start with, and like in most cases, it's there. In 1 year, we had downy mildew on the transplants we put in the ground. All right, so it's a problem. The other area that why we think we get some control later on in the season, there's also environmental factors as well, and this could very well play a part in some of our efficacy data as you go along in the season. As it gets cooler and so forth, there may be less pressure as well. So it's environmentally driven as well. Does that help out, John?
You showed really good control with Ridamil early in the season, then dropping off. How many applications were made?
In some of those trials, we're doing it up every week. In 1 year, I think it was 10, which would never be on a label. So we're over putting way too much Ridamil down just to see if it's efficacy. But part of the reason we do that is to see if control fails, or we see the disease build up later in the season, just to see if we might be detecting a resistance or a lack of control with Ridamil. And Rick and Meg, have you worked with Ridamil?
No, I've done a lot of work with Ridamil, but only as a soil drench.
Okay.
I don't think Syngenta will ever approve a foliar label for it.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
So I would never recommend a foliar application or depend on one.
Yeah, that's a good point to make right now, Rick, is everything we're doing here, you're going to see me, Rick, is experimental. So we're applying things that are off-label or not labeled, and some things that will never have labels. We're just looking to look across efficacy channels to see what may work and what may not. So we're not promoting the use of chemicals off-label based on our data here. So don't go home and buy all this stuff. And so this is just research talk. How's that? Does that clear us from liability? John?
Just one thing, have you ever tested or collected data for yield after your treatment? Because during our studies, we found even some treatment could provide pretty good protection, but the yield just was not high because, basil is different. You use the leaves. Even you got top of layers, you cannot use it.
Yeah, and that's a good question. Joanne's asking if we ever collect yield on our trials. And no, we don't. We just go out and do the ratings. It's part of our program and timing and things like that. But that's a good point. Rick and Meg, do you guys collect yield data?
I've done biomass data quite a bit, and you can definitely see very significant differences in biomass. I have a couple pictures that I'll show you.
Okay, great. Good point. Any more questions before? One more, Dave. Go ahead.
Just one comment. Moving forward, whatever chemical controls we come up with that does work, I think it's going to be a good idea. You always promote, tank mixing to keep resistance from building. So I think whatever we do, we want to keep phosphate in there in a tank mix to keep everything working. If you find a good chemical control, you're going to want to keep it working.
And that's a good point. I mentioned that earlier.
You'll see that in my talk.
Great. Well, so hopefully answers to some of those questions. We're running a little bit behind. I'm going to move on and invite. Time to move on.